Hi, in this chapter, we are going to learn about Spring Boot AutoConfiguration. A Spring Boot AutoConfiguration is a feature that simplifies the configuration of Spring application by automatically configuring components based on libraries and dependencies that are present on class path. Now, when the application starts, Spring Boot scans the class path to identify the libraries and dependencies that are present. It then applies sensible defaults and automatically configures the necessary components based on those dependencies. Like, for example, if we have different database connections, we have web server, and we want to enable Spring security feature and much more. Now, why do we need Spring Boot auto configuration? Generally, in normal Spring based applications, we have to do lots of configurations, which takes lots of developer effort. When we use Spring MVC, Hibernate, JPA, we have to configure components like component scan, dispatcher servlet, view resolver, and web jars if we want to use Spring MVC. If we want to use Hibernate, JPA, we want to configure data source, entity manager, transaction manager, and other artifacts as well. Now, Spring Boot auto configuration is helping to make the life of developers easy by providing a configuration way so that developers need not to configure explicitly. Now, what is happening in a Spring Boot application? It detects the jars and the libraries. Let me show you what are jars and libraries on the class path. So this is a build.gradle file. Now, if we see, these are the dependencies. Spring Boot has the dependency of Spring Boot Starter JPA, Spring Boot Starter GraphQL, Spring Boot Starter Email, Spring Boot Cloud Config Server. These are the class paths that are present on the application. So generally these are the libraries that are present on the class path of this application. Now, Spring Boot AutoConfig. Let's look at the flow of Spring Boot AutoConfiguration. So when the Spring Boot application starts, it detects what are the libraries are present on the class path, and then it configured these beans. Now, if and only if the beans are present on the class path, then only it will configure depending upon conditional on class, conditional on beans, and conditional on property. Now, beans are configured on class and with default configurations that are provided by Spring Boot. And then beans will be available for use in application. So let's look at this example. In this example, like we have seen, we were having Spring Data JPA in the class path here. So when we started this application, if you see, it is saying bootstrapping Spring Data JPA repositories in default mode. It means it is bootstrapping the default configurations for the Spring Boot application. It is initializing the Tomcat container. Then if you see the setting that we have added for Hikari pool, it is initializing the in-memory database for the application to use. It is also initialized JPA Entity Manager Factory. Just because it was present on the class path, it has initialized this Entity Manager Factory. So we have not written any code explicitly to initialize this Entity Manager Factory for Spring Data JPA. This feature is known as auto configuration and is provided by Spring Boot. Then the server is up and running, and in the end we can see that the application started in 4.027 seconds. Now, the auto configuration feature uses conditional bean registration, which means the configuration is applied only if the required dependencies are present. This ensures that the application is lightweight and does not include any unnecessary configurations. Hence, Spring Boot auto configuration is helping the developers to focus on business logic, and it is auto configuring the jars, the dependencies that are present on the class path by initializing and making it available for the application to use. Now, let's look at this example. We have this example and the class is tagged with @Spring Boot application. Now, if we see what is inside @Spring Boot application, @Spring Boot application comprises of enable auto configuration, component scan, and configuration annotation. Hence, if the Spring Boot application is tagged with @Spring Boot application, your class is tagged with @Spring Boot application, then inherently it is getting this feature of @enable auto configuration, because this annotation is using @enable auto configuration. That is the reason you don't have to put three annotations explicitly. The advice is to use @Spring Boot application to get the advantage of @auto configuration. Thank you.